So, one thing I'd really like Tanya to talk about with us is how we often hear people slinging around the term narcissism and in casual conversation to describe somebody who's egotistical or self centered, selfish. But what really qualifies somebody as narcissistic versus narcissistic personality disorder? Because there's a difference there. Um, so that's something that I think we really need to address. And we need to caution our viewers not to self diagnose or diagnose those who we love.
Right. And just to piggyback on that, um, on the other side, I think that for my experience, I had gotten out of one, now I know was a narcissistic relationship, and into another one. And I literally thought I was going crazy. The gaslighting was insurmountable, and I was speaking with someone extremely qualified in the mental health care profession at UCLA who had known this man since he was young, since he was probably an early teen. And he said, well, he has narcissistic personality disorder. And I'd never heard this term before. This is 20 years ago. And it made so much sense. It gave me back myself to know that I was dealing with someone with this disorder, and I learned a lot about it. And so I never threw that term around or self-diagnosed, but it gave me validity. It gave me like my sanity back, actually. So I think, yeah, there's a real tendency to label anyone that's controlling or selfish as a narcissist, but it's also important to be able to identify and get some backup when you are dealing with an actual narcissist, because the mind games that they play with you are intense and insane. And I had a therapist that said, don't let crazy people make you crazy. And that really resonates, because that's what was happening to me. I was literally going crazy, and finding out what I was dealing with gave me a real sense of empowerment, actually.
That's fantastic.
What were some of the signs?
Yeah, and tell us, what is gaslighting? The explanation of gaslighting. I know Tanya will, but I'd like to know yours, because that's always been a thing that confuses
Right.
me. And
Right. Well, for example, one of the things that I can say in the second relationship was, this is before IMDb was really out. And I would say something like, well, I was on a soap opera for 4 years. And he'd say, prove it. No, you weren't. Have the producer call me and tell me. Like, every reality of my life, he discredited and said, prove it. And like literally making me question my own history, who I was. And that to me is gaslighting, basically like negating your truth with fiction, and to the point where you start questioning your own truth. um it happens so many times with so many different situations. But I was like, for example, cheating, when either my first or second narcissist would cheat, they would accuse me of cheating like aggressively. And
wow.
it would make me like crazy. It literally would make me crazy, because I was sitting here having to prove my truth, knowing that it was them that was doing it. And yet, being basically verbally beaten into submission, and denying their actual infidelities. It's really crazy making. If you're told enough that you're bad or weak or not a real woman, because a real woman would do this or this or this, it's really insanity. And I used to, before I knew what I was dealing with, before speaking with this man at UCLA, I used to think in my mind, I mean, this is the systematic destruction of a human soul, mine. And I couldn't wrap my mind around how it was happening. And at some point I was like addicted to them, or I couldn't, I guess I needed them to validify me to get myself back or something. Understand why they say no contact when dealing with separating from a narcissist, because I was constantly trying to prove I was who I was, because that was the point we had gotten to in that relationship. I felt like I had to prove I existed.
Carrie,
Oh
can I
my
ask you a
goodness.
question?
Yeah.
So why would you fall in love with these people, and why did you stay so long? Like, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how did they reel you in? He had to have some
Right.
charisma or something.
Right. It's a sort of, it's a very, and I've learned a lot about it obviously since, but it's a really typical cycle of abuse. Initially, there's a lot of charm, and they tell you wonderful things. I mistook obsession for love. I mistook their obsession with me, because it's a weird coexistence, like this symbiotic, unhealthy, toxic relationship. But they need their victims as much as they make us need them. And I'm one of those people. I'm a nurturer, a fixer, and so it's a combination of this charm and this broken bit that you subconsciously realize, and before you know it, you're in this cycle of abuse, and it's insane, because there was this need in me to prove I was worthy of existence. I was so broken, but it got to the point where they convinced me that without them, I would basically not exist. And it's slow. It doesn't happen overnight. In the beginning, it's great because they're extremely charming. They shower you with gifts, and they make you think that you're like the most special person in the world. And it's like the change is slow, and you don't realize it's happening until you're this just broken person.
Carrie, when you started talking, I don't know if you realize this, but you started by saying, when I was cheating. And so it made it, yeah. And so
Yeah.
it made it sound like you're still in his hall of mirrors. And I
Right,
wondered if
right.
you realized that. And
Did
John said,
not.
tell her she said that and see if she realized it. So
Yeah.
I wonder if we ever get rid of the narcissist control completely. I mean, that's an interesting, I wanted to just, John said, ask her if she
Yeah.
realized that, or
I
if that was,
didn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Mm-mm.
didn't either. And I mean, I didn't hear it that way, but he did, because he's listening, and
Right,
I'm
right.
listening. I'm like, wow, because and then I know how that feels, because it's like anybody I've ever been with who is a real narcissist accused me of cheating all the time,
Right.
and or it seemed like they were trying to cast you in a role that they made up in their head about you.
Well, the weird part is, for example, narcissist number two, um, like I was on this show for 4 years, and narcissist number one was on a show for about 8 months. And narcissist number two said, no, he was on the show for 4 years. You were on it for 8 months. And I'm like, no, that's just not true. And he's like, prove it. These guys were just like, you know, it's apparently a really common trait for a narcissist to take whatever it is they're doing, quote, wrong, and accuse you of it. And apparently that's like a
Right.
pretty standard operating procedure, but they're really good at it. And you start, like I said before, you start doubting your own reality and your own truth. And that's why
Did
the
he
no
ever-
contact is so important.
Yeah.
When he offered you little breadcrumbs of acceptance and approval, I'm sure that was just like self-validation, and you started perhaps striving for that more. And is that kind of
Sure.
another thing that kept you in?
Sure. And, I think they call it Stockholm syndrome, like, with kidnappers
Mm-hmm.
and their hostages, they develop this dependency. And I think the same is people with narcissists, especially when you have just been broken and you sort of look at them as your survival mechanism. Without them, you don't exist. I mean, this, like I said, this takes years. It doesn't happen. It's not a 5 minute or 3 date encounter. It's a process of dismantling one person's entire psyche and the other person taking control, and it's extremely abusive. And if you know anything about the cycle of abuse, there is the honeymoon period, and then the abuse, and then the I'm sorry, then the honeymoon period. And it's just this insidious thing because you start thinking, well, maybe they are nice. Maybe I thought it all. It's a whole system of your own reality losing credibility with yourself.
That
When you
right there is
finally,
very powerful, because that's also how I felt too. I kept questioning, well, did I do that? Did I forget that at the grocery store? Did I do that? Wait a minute. Checking my own mind, going, I know I did this. I wrote this down. And, before pictures and, like you said, before IMDb and all, I can totally understand that and relate to that. It's like, prove it. What
Right.
for? Why do you need to know that? And what does it even, when you look back on a relationship with a person with NPD, it's you if you tried to make a list of what you did in a day, it would be hard because you're so confused all the time trying to make sure that you're not doing anything that they might think is wrong or question, because it could cause an explosion or the end of the world. I mean,
Right. And
you're
like it's the type of
weird.
thing where I would cook pancakes for breakfast and later they would say, "Oh no, we had eggs for breakfast." And I'm knowing I cooked pancakes for breakfast, but then I start thinking, or was it eggs? I mean, that's how crazy making it is. Like every little detail of your life you start to doubt. And it's crazy making. It is. I ended up taking my dog and getting in my car and driving from Los Angeles to Virginia, then up to Boston, then out to New York, then down to do Katrina relief. I literally had to leave my entire life in order to find myself again.
Wow.
how
That
did he
is,
react when you did that? When you up and left? What was his reaction to that?
Um, well, at this point, my dad had tried to get a restraining order, or had gotten a restraining order against him on my behalf, and the restraining order had just expired, and I was at his house again, and my dad called the police and said, "I need you to do a welfare check on my daughter," and sent the police to his house, and he went absolutely ballistic. And so when he's like literally physically pushing me out of the house, he's like, "You have to go now." And shortly after that, I realized that I wasn't going to be good to anybody if I didn't find myself. And I literally had to be by myself with my dog. And, I took 8 months out of my life. I wasn't with my family, nothing. And I got in my little car and drove. And I know most people can't do that. And I really didn't have the luxury of doing that, but I had no alternative at that point. At that point, if I hadn't done that, I probably would have killed myself. That's the point we were at. At one point I did try to kill myself, like heavy duty medical miracle that I'm alive. I was in the hospital for quite a while, and because I didn't know how to get away. I didn't know how to end
And
it. And, go ahead.
you had kids through this also. You had
Yeah.
kids through this also, right? So what
Yes.
was
Yes.
going on with them? How did he treat them, and how did that affect them?
Um, he alienated me from my children, and it has taken years. One of my children and my boys and I are really close. My daughter thinks I am this horrible person. Both these men have police records for physical abuse against me. Of course, they accused me of being abusive to the children, which, of course, there is no police record or documentation of. But again, it's that turning what they're doing and accusing the other person. It's kind of shocking. It's really shocking. I have no relationship with my daughter at this time, and I love her, and I don't blame her, because she has been told that I'm this horrible person, and she doesn't know me. She doesn't know who I am. It's so destructive to so many lives. And I feel like, personally, my coping mechanisms of getting over it have been, I turned to deep spirituality, and I took that time I needed. I don't think a lot of people have that available to them. And so one of the things I hope we can really provide to people are resources, and even past resources, just personal experience of what worked for us. Because sometimes like hypnotherapy works, their therapy works, but sometimes there's things that those people don't tell you, like, for example, like believing in karma, believing in a higher power. All those things really work for me, because I see it in action, and it takes the power away from them. Like, these people that I was terrified of them, I thought that they would kill me.
Carrie and Robin, I have a question for both of you guys. Do you think there's ever a situation where you can be in a relationship with a narcissistic personality disordered person and make it successful? Can you change the person? Because a lot of people are in that situation and they think, I can change this.
I don't think a narcissist can change. I think that there are relationships that work because perhaps they find someone who is such the nurturer, healer, and willing to be the participant. I think, like, for example, for me, is I subconsciously even struggled against the person, the two of them, knowing that this was unhealthy somewhere, and fighting it. But I don't know that I don't know clinically if a narcissist can change or be treated. I do know from the conversation I had with the man at UCLA that it's one of the most difficult disorders to treat, particularly because a narcissist never thinks there's anything wrong with them. So why should they get help? It's the other people.
I feel the same way as you do, Carrie. However, I think a person within PD definitely doesn't think that they have anything wrong with them. And they, for instance, something so simple as this. My father has taught me a lot of wonderful things as far as how to survive, but he was a horrible narcissist to most everybody else. Like in the relationship with Donald Trump and Ivanka, I was Ivanka. My brother was, I guess, Don Jr. or Eric, and now is teaching his children to be super, super aggressive boys, alpha male, all of that stuff. And I'm just full of empathy. And my dad was the only person the only narcissist I've ever met who pulled back the mask and let me see that they had real emotions, but would put that back on in front of everybody else. So it was very confusing to me all the time as a little girl and as growing up. I don't think they can heal, but I do think they can burn out. I learned that from a therapist in New York City, and a person that specializes in personality disorders told me that people with personality disorders can never get well, kill themselves, or burn out. And the burnout usually comes when they're too old to be pretty enough to manipulate the next supply. There's a specific, I'm sure Tanya will talk more about this, but I learned a lot about this from her. There's some systems that a narcissist will go through with a new person, and that the clinical term for new person is supply. So the narcissist typically love bombs someone, and that makes you feel, like that. I'm in love. Oh my God, this is just great. I met the love of my life. It's perfect. And then all of a sudden, they change, and then you can't do anything right. And that gaslighting thing, which Carrie explained, happens. And it's really, really hard to know when you're being gaslit because you've already been. It's like being directed all the time. Like Carrie was on a TV show for 4 years, reading lines and being directed. A narcissist does that to you every moment, every second, so that you're constantly going, okay, am I acting the character to where they want me to be? Am I the right person? Did I really say that? Did I really do that? Who am I? Where am I? What am I? And then you want to self-destruct. It's that bad. And then right when you think you're going to self-destruct and kill yourself, they go back to the love bombing phase. And you're just so confused. It's like being putting it into yourself into a Vitamix and pressing pulse and then stop, pulse and then stop. And you're like, okay, there's my arm. Let me put that back on. Let me put my nose back here. And then you're all messed up and you're not yourself anymore. So you don't know who you are. So what you said about getting away for 8 months, and that's so beneficial. That is such a resource that brings to me so many ideas that you and I have discussed before about retreats and things like that. There's ways that we can get things like that going, because people who can't afford it should be able to go to a place where they have enough to not worry about anything else but themselves for a time, because it takes so long to heal from a narcissist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had an experience where with one of these people, I woke up in the middle of the night and they were leaning over me, whispering in my ear, "I hate you, you fucking cunt. I hate you." And I was literally like shocked. But so it's that insidious in that, like, it happens in your sleep, literally.
They're attracted to people like us, and smart
It's funny
people,
that
and
you
people with
mentioned that.
money. They like that.
I was doing some research myself, and there was a whole bunch of studies that say that these people actually have a very fragile self-esteem, and they
Yeah.
can't handle criticism at all.
That's
Yeah,
100%
I
correct. They
find that
can't
I
handle it at all.
totally believe that. And they get volatile. If you say anything critical, all of a sudden you're this horrible person. What do you know? And it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And
Yeah.
I think I mentioned in one of our text threads that something I read recently said that narcissists always present themselves as either valor or victim, never the villain. And it's true. They will not take responsibility for their part in anything that shines a bad light on them. They don't know how to say I'm sorry. It's always, they're the victim of some crazy woman, me, or they're the hero. They came in and saved someone, and they're never responsible. They're never culpable. It's like shocking to me that someone wouldn't know how to say I'm sorry.
It is. Have you
And when
ever
you
have
put
you
them in
ever
the
had a
corner,
narcissist apologize to you, and how did it make you feel if they did?
Nope.
I have. I have had one apologize to me because when I was getting treatment from Bianca, I learned a few things and I was still somewhat enmeshed with him. Uh, and I I was so evil to him. I doubled down on him. I did the whole graystone or grayscale thing where you act like the narcissist does and you mirror them and it makes you feel really bad. So I wouldn't advise anybody to do this, but I have a scientific mind. So if there's an experiment I can try, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Even if it's stabbing my own self for some reason to get a cell out. I mean, I'm talking about real science stuff. So I decided to treat this person exactly like they treated me. Well, they didn't know what to do with that. And it made them lose their shit and apologize to me over and over and beg me for forgiveness and all this. And it made me feel filthy and dirty. And I'll never do it again. But it was highly effective in, in management of someone with NPD. I think this might be a tool that therapists could treat somebody, but they would have to be a really strong, powerful person like me. And I'm not saying that because I'm great or anything. I'm saying I've just been through a lot of shit. I've been in an physically abusive relationship with a man who's 17 years older than me when I was in college, who nearly killed me and beat me. And I've been raped before. I've been through two horrible hurricanes and lost homes, and I've, and now I have a terminal illness. So I'm just saying, I'm tougher than a lot of people are, and I've been in the film industry like Carrie a long time. People say the most evil things to you. You have to just go,
yeah,
whatever,
they do.
and really, really feel that way. So I was able to confidently, without losing myself, go into this grayscale activity with this narcissist to try to make them. Honestly, I did it for a reason that most women do. Well, some women, me, like someone hurts me and hurts my heart and I know I'm just a good person, sometimes deep in my maniacal mind I'm like, I wish that motherfucker hurt as much as I have because I didn't deserve it and I'm sick of this shit. So I'll think it usually and don't act on it. But when I learned the gravestone thing, I'm like, why not make him hurt? Because why can't I just go ahead and do that? I have all this time on my hands. Well, that was really mean and really not good. And all of the things that your therapists tell you about not doing that are absolutely 100% correct, because it does nothing but emotionally damage you, that you have to pay way more money to get fixed again. But yeah, it worked and it made him apologize. But was it even worth it? No. So that resource might not be good, but it might be good for someone to buy some time to get out to save their kids. I mean, that's the only value I could find in it. But that's the only time besides my dad would apologize to me because he didn't want to lose me. But I was his daughter. He never apologized to any other living human. But this guy that I'm talking about, um, only apologized to me because I was as horrible to him as he was to me. That's not a great way to live your life. And if you're an empath or even a person who cares about other people at all, um, it just makes you feel filthy dirty, like you're covered with stuff you can't get off of you. And I imagine going into that is the way a narcissist must feel every day of their lives, which is very sad to me because I know in my personal life, I have people with cluster B personality disorders that are not just narcissistic personality disorder, but others. And I worry for the trauma that's in their mind, the tornado that lives in their mind. That's sort of the way it was presented to me by a therapist before. And I've been asked by this person who's very close to me to not name them and not discuss their story personally. So I won't, but I will tell you that I know that they feel horrible inside. And when they attach to another person, they get some comfort. And whenever they feel like you're disassociating, and your disassociation from a narcissist could be as much as as feeling comfort and love and acting normal, they feel like you're going to leave them, so they start testing you. They're so desperately afraid that you're going to leave them. Please don't leave me. Please don't leave me, is what their mind is saying to them. When you're thinking, I feel love and I feel safe and this is going to be okay and I can just be my normal self. And they'll never let you get there. That's how it feels to me. That's my experience with that.
I think narcissists, it's the perfect marriage, right? A narcissist and like an empath. I mean, everyone's getting their fix, and real nurturing, sensitive, empathetic people won't necessarily fight back, because even if someone's being terrible to them, they don't want to be unkind. They don't want to hurt someone. It's, to intentionally hurt someone is a very difficult thing. And so it's everyone's getting what they need or whatever until they don't, until, it all breaks and shatters.
And do you find like that's
Okay.
in that wash and wear, that cycle, like love bombing, discard, and new,
Sure.
that's the whole thing?
Sure. Until though, I don't know any narcissistic relationship that has really endured and both people come out okay. I mean, I know in my case, there was the cycle until I was just too broken. And I still, I became that woman that I like felt sorry for. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
if I, but I didn't fight back because I was so afraid that they would literally just crush me like a bug.
What did you think? When you were in that worst feeling, when they made you feel the worst about yourself, what did you think that they could do to you that would, how bad did it make you feel? What did you really think they could do? The power. I mean, discuss the power if you can.
Well, I think I addressed that a little bit before. I mean, literally, it was at this point where I was so unsure of everything. Like left was right, right was left, that I felt like they kind of defined my existence. And so it was that really sort of like, fight or flight brain or whatever, where you just sort of like freeze. I froze because I couldn't flee, I couldn't fight, so I froze and I just broke.
Can we switch gears for 1 minute, because we've been talking about being in a relationship with a narcissist, but and you can get out of it. There are ways we can get you out of it. But what about if you're the child of a narcissist? What would you, Robin, say as a child of a narcissist, and what would you, Carrie, say as the mother of children who are
Right.
with the father of a narcissist?
Do you want me to answer
You're
first or do you want
stuck.
what?
Yeah, no. You go
Oh,
ahead and answer. Yeah.
well, just my first narcissistic experience was with my father, who I thought basically hung the moon. Um, I didn't realize that in him selecting me as the favorite, he was deselecting everyone else on the planet as just being inferior. Um, it makes you feel like you are perfect all the time and quite entitled. And then when you grow up and you learn things and you have to learn how to act in society, and you start seeing damage, you start seeing the way a narcissistic parent teaches their child to be is to do as I say, not as I do. And that's what I did. I was a good daughter who did all the right things, and I listened and learned, and I didn't fight back much, and I wasn't really rebellious or horrible, and I rode horses and I did ballet and I did all the things, and I thought everything was perfect. I didn't know around me that everybody else was getting a raining hell on their lives. I thought that my mother was insane for kicking my dad out. I didn't, because I never heard any of their fights. I thought the divide and conquer that my brother was doing with my mom was because of him and because my mom. My mom ended up being so hurt and so broken that she never got to put herself back together. And I even blamed her almost until she died, which I can't even explain to you the fallout on family because my mom died in 2019 and I never really got to make this right for her. The last thing I said to her when she was on a ventilator is, "It's okay, sweet girl. You can go. It's okay, sweet girl. You can go." And I was her mom for most of her life, for most of my life, because I didn't know she couldn't be a mom to me. But I know that now and I know why. And I feel so sad for anybody who had to live their whole life and have it shattered and never get to go 8 months and go find themselves like Carrie did. But that's clearly a way that you can get through it because it broke my mom. It broke her whole life. And I feel partially responsible for that through my narcissistic dad. So that's that's part of it.
Um, I know, just in my dynamics that, um, my daughter thinks that her dad can do no wrong and that I'm this monster. And it's sort of the same type of relationship you're describing, Robin, with your dad. And all I can do there is, wish her the best, love her unconditionally, and let her go. Because I can't let it destroy me again. My older son has had terrible problems. He's willing to talk about it. So I'm not saying anything that he wouldn't want known, but he's had a really, really hard time. He deals with severe depression. He said that his father told him, if you have a relationship with your mother, you can't have a relationship with me. And he's really struggled. And all I can do is provide resources, provide my personal experience, encourage him to take care of himself and to let go. The big one is letting go because, there's that sort of pathological need to please the narcissist that gets instilled in their victims. And I think letting go of that it sounds so contrite to say, oh, let it go. You have to learn how to let go. But letting go is what saved me. And I know it works. And taking away any power, like right now, today, I can honestly say, I do not give a flying fuck what any of these people think about me or say about me. And if I can get my son even halfway there, I'll consider that a victory, because right now it's still tearing him up. And as a mother and a survivor, it's so heartbreaking. And I know we're going to talk about this on another show, but resources are so limited for people that have psychological issues. And, I can trace this progression of my son's mental illness, and it's so hard to get help. And that's one of the things that I would like to give people hope about, is even if you say just financially or time wise or whatever the reason is, you have a really hard time finding help, help is available even inside yourself. You just really have to learn how to meditate and how to release them of their hold on you. You have to release them.
Would you guys tell kids who are in a relationship with a parent who is a narcissist right now? They just realize that they're in this relationship, that their parents are narcissistic. What would you tell them to help them survive and to get through it? They can't just leave. They
It
don't have
depends
that
on the
option.
age of the kid, first of all.
Yeah, definitely.
But here's the thing. Narcissists make adults feel like they won't survive without them. So that's what they do to kids too. It's a matter of survival to please this person. It is literally a matter of survival. Now, for a kid, especially if they're not legally able to leave, that's a really hard place to be in. And legally, I don't know what recourse they have. It's really difficult. And, I'm not a religious person, but I did go to a church service with my then aunt. She's divorced from my uncle now, but in Arizona once. And the preacher, minister, I don't know what it was called. He was talking about judgment and saying that it's not for us to judge other people, but it is for us to judge whether or not we allow them in our life. And that really stuck with me. And I circled back to that now. This was before I really got broken. But I circle back to that now, and I would suggest to kids that they have the right and obligation to self to judge what is okay for their life. But man, it's hard because they literally are dependent on their parents for survival, protection, love, having their needs met. And in the case of a narcissistic parent, they intensify that feeling of without me, you will die. And just on a primal level, people want to live. And so they become like this built-in victim.
I agree with that. As a kid, I realize now when you just said that I didn't choose any of the extracurricular activities that I was put in. Because we belonged to a country club, it was just, I was on the tennis team, I was on the swim team, I had to be an equestrian and a ballerina. And I had to be the best of those things. And I didn't have a choice. And no one ever said, do you like this? What do you want to do, Robin? I didn't know. So perhaps they have more manipulative charge in their children's lives than we even consider. And maybe we do need to ask Tanya something like this, since she does deal with families like this. It's her specialty, actually. And a lot of narcissists and people with borderline personality disorder and other cluster B personality disorders also often self-medicate. So the component of addiction is also in there. So
it's such a tricky thing for kids. He was angry and suicidal and all these things. My happy child disappeared. And I think one of the biggest problems is, even if they're in an environment where there's professional help available, what's this person going to do? Oh, your parent's a narcissist and your mother is so broken, she's going to try and kill herself in 2 years. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like there's
It's
no
like, where is
narcissistic
help?
parent wouldn't even allow their child to go and get help. I mean, if you're a narcissistic
Exactly.
parent, you're not going to give
You don't
your
want
child
exposure.
over and potentially
Expose yourself.
potentially lose that connection.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you're kind of stuck, but maybe there's some sort of preservation, self-preservation that Tanya can help.
Maybe we could
enlighten
talk
us
about
to
tools.
for kids.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
unfortunately,
For,
most kids aren't aware of it. They're not aware of what's going on.
I wasn't aware of
Right.
it my whole life. I wasn't aware of it my whole life.
Until they're older and you get
Yeah.
therapy and whatnot. I mean, it's a really tricky situation. And like I didn't fight hard enough for my kids because I was so broken. A friend of mine once said, when we were discussing this, she said, oh, I was at the point where you wouldn't have to open the door for me because I was so small I could walk under it. That's how you feel,
Wow.
that broken. And,
Wow.
you feel
Sorry.
like you're a horrible parent. You start buying into all this crap. And now, from an outside perspective, looking at these people's lives, I realize, God, they're just damaged, broken people. And I have empathy, but my judgment is not to have them in my life.
The United States spends more per person on healthcare than other high-income countries, but still has a lower life expectancy.
We have poor outcomes relative to other countries. We pay twice as much as any other country. We pay more and get less.
My platform is built on me talking about being in therapy and dealing with narcissistic personality disorder. I don't trust people with my information because I know I use other people's information against them.
Name brand Adderall is still available for $290 with insurance. It's the generic stuff that most people can afford that's running low. You have a productivity crisis with a slowdown in Adderall and whatnot. You have a literal healthcare crisis if people can't get blood pressure medication, diabetic medication.
These institutions' board of directors gets to choose who gets a liver, who deserves one, and why.
That's a common question to ask all transplant patients. Are you fundraising?
Are you saying environmental influences rewire the brain?
Whatever we do consistently will wire up the brain. Neurons that fire together wire together.
It's usually the folks that have the highest IQ who are most susceptible to developing serious mental illness. When somebody has a psychotic break, it's like a heart attack. It's like a brain attack. It takes a long time to recover from that.
They all took an oath that said, first, do no harm. I'm really fucking angry.
The policies and regulations in place by our governments place people in a position where either they're priced out, they're not allowed to do something with medical doctors, or something that they want to do is banned. So what it does is it forces people to start doing things on their own and learning things on their own. Anybody can learn to be a medical doctor.
We're taught not to see ourselves as part of a collective with a lot more power than the small group that created the system.